I'm going to be doing a brake repair here today, or just a maintenance item. This is my 99 Suburban. It's a 6.5 liter diesel, so it's got the equipment you'd see with a 3/4 ton, even though it's a 1500. So this is an applicable video to any of the old body style 90s trucks with 8 lugs that either have the diesel engine option or are 2500 or 3500 vehicles. What we're going to be replacing out is, it's time to turn these rotors. It's been a while, and so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put some new ones on for the video, and then we'll take these down to the machine shop, turn them, and we'll swap them the next time we do this. We're going to be replacing the original from 1999 brake hose. Not experiencing any problems with it, but it's old, and we're going to be in there anyway, and mainly because I'm going to have to be swapping out the caliper because it does have a problem. And as well, it's time for new pads, so we're going to do the whole works. Now in these vehicles, I've got the wheel off already. I've got the key turned to just, the on position where the dash light's light, and I've unlocked the steering wheel by doing that. And I've done that so that I can move this around as I need to, position it wise for what I'm going to be taking off, so I won't have to keep getting in and out of the cab. So what I'm going to be doing first is removing the caliper, and to get that guy off, I'm going to be using a 9mm Allen type wrench. And what we're going to do is, there's a couple of bolts here, one on the top and one on the bottom, and I'm going to be taking these guys off, or out rather. And these are the pins that the caliper rides on, and they secure themselves into the back of the spindle. There's one down here on the bottom. Same kind of deal. This one, you can see the little rubber shroud is coming off with the pin, but all that hardware gets replaced in the ACDelco kit that you get with new pads anyway. Alright, so once this guy is loosened up all the way, we'll be able to get the caliper itself off. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and just work these pins out, and then we'll come back as we remove the caliper. Okay, I've got these pins out all the way. They should look about that far out, and the caliper should be moving like this. All right, so top and bottom. So sometimes it's a little hard to get out. I like to take like a little brass hammer, give it a little bit of persuasion until I can get one end to work its way loose. And then you can take the whole thing. I'm going to set it up here for a minute because, like I said, we're changing out this rotor too. I'm going to just, if I wasn't changing out the hose, I might not take this kind of care, but so let's assume I was keeping it. I want to keep it from binding because I don't want it to kink up inside and end up causing something like a pull. So keep it nice and straight, and then we'll use a bungee cord to keep them up here and out of the way. I'm going to turn our attention now to getting the rotor off. Now the rotor, this is the hardest part of this job. This rotor is held on the back side here. Easier for the camera to look at it from, I guess this side's probably the easiest for the camera side. Let me turn it all the way. Coming around on the back side here, you can see we got these two 15mm bolts. There's one here and there's one here. This is the hardest part of the job, is getting these off. And I spent some more time on this in another video where I change out the hub that I did a few years ago, but it's going to be the same kind of practice here. So I'm going to be using a 15mm 6-point only impact quality socket, because the key thing is, the key to this being an afternoon hour job, or being a job that takes all weekend, is not ruining the heads on these bolts. And then a breaker bar. I like to use this Craftsman 20-inch one I've got here. You can use whatever similar. You don't want to use an impact wrench. You're going to tear the heads up, and definitely not a 12-point socket. You're going to tear the heads up. Now they're going to be rusty, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a little PB blaster on here. Just try to help myself whatever I can. Let it soak in underneath the head and the spindle. Can't really get at the threads because they're inside the spindle. And I'm going to let this sit for, I don't know, maybe 15-20 minutes. And then I'm going to come back and try to pull this guy out. going to do the same thing on the other side too. So I'm going to take a break in the video, and we'll come back after we've let that PB blaster soak in a bit. Waited long enough here. I put a little flashlight on here, hopefully help you. I'm going to get into position here with my socket and my breaker bar. Now remember, these are lefty-loosey, so we're going to be pulling up. And I'm going to have to back this camera out a little bit so I can get some leverage. There we go. There we go. All right. It's always a good sign if the first one doesn't give you trouble. Just going to keep using the breaker bar here till I feel like it might be loose enough to get in here with a ratchet wrench. That one's at a ratchet point. Maybe one more turn. There we go. Okay. Now let me go down here and try to get into the bottom one. Again, I'm just taking extra time to make sure I got this socket properly seated, because I don't want to mess up these heads. There we go. All right. Like I said, you know, this is the hardest part of this whole thing. I've had these in some cases break off. That one is a lot more torque than the top one. And that ruins your day. It's a trip to the junkyard, or rather the salvage yard, to get a new spindle when that happens. All right, I got these off. You get the idea. I'm going to take the two on the other side off as well, or rather loosen them up, and then we'll come back and I'll ratchet them out. Okay guys, got this off the breaker bar, loose rather. Now I'm going to take that same socket and come in here with my ratchet wrench, and I'm going to work these guys out. And I guess, you know, at some point you could probably come in here with an impact wrench to finish the job. I prefer hand tools. Now 3 of the 4 of these weren't any problem at all. This one underneath this one here is really tough to get out. I'll take a look at it in just a minute. All right. So, you know, what happens is they go through to the other side. They get a little bit of rust on the end. I can see this guy, he's got a little bit of the shoulders are softening up, so I'm probably going to want to look for a new bolt the next time I'm at the salvage yard to replace this one. This one down here I know is definitely going to have to come and get replaced. Get it out here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Oops. Fortunately, it didn't give us a hard time today. Get it out just like the other one, and we'll take a look at it. A little bit more. There we go. So, you know, rust-wise on the threads, it's okay, but, oops, yeah, dropped my wrench. The top is definitely seen better days, and I was lucky I didn't get stuck on this. I didn't used to change these myself. I used to take them down to the dealer and let him do them even after the vehicle was out of warranty. And that's the kind of work I guess it gets done at the dealer. So definitely replacing this bolt. Probably replace the other one as well. All right, so I'm going to take these two on the other side out, and we'll come back, and I'll show you how we proceed to the next step. Okay, guys, I got these 4 bolts out. Let me just give you a quick look here. And you can see this guy, it's in great shape. No problems at all. I'll reuse this one for sure. And then on this, the bottom one has just a little bit of some scuffing where, you know, somebody at one point damaged it. I know it wasn't me. And then on the other side, it's, you know, quite extensive like we saw, and it just got worse when I was trying to get it off. So I'm going to replace all 4 of these at some point. I'm going to put them back on today because I don't have them. But you're doing yourself a favor if you make sure that the flats on the heads of these bolts are nice and perfect, because over time they're going to get rusted in there like they were today, and it's going to be hard to remove them. And if you put something like this back in there, and then 5 years down the road you go try to get it out, you're not going to be able to get it out, and it's going to be a super, super ruined day. Anyway, so now we got those out, we're going to move on to the next 2 steps. I'm going to put some penetrating lubricant on this front axle nut, because that's going to be the next guy that we try to get out here. There's a nut and a washer. Just let this stuff soak in. And then while that's going on, since we're taking the rotor off, and the rotor and the hub are a single assembly held in by these pressed-in wheel studs, we're going to have to take off the ABS sensor harness assembly. So I'm going to do that next. Get that out of the way. It's a 13 millimeter, so those spindle nuts were 15s. There's a 13 right here on top. Get that guy loosened up. And we'll finish his ass off the easy way. Set that aside. What we want to do is we want to get this harness out of the way, and we'll put this back in there so no crud gets inside the hole. Then we're going to work this harness out of these 2 clips here. Bungee out of the way for a minute. All right, now I got that out of the way, and then we got another one to take off right here. Same 13 millimeter. This guy, I think, has a nut on the bottom. Now I have to go get something to hold that. Let me get something like a crescent wrench or another socket to hold the bottom. We'll take this guy out, and then you follow this lead up. We're going to be disconnecting it right here. And then right on the inside, under the hood, there's another one of these brackets like this with another 13 that we're going to have to take out. And then we'll have this harness for the ABS sensor free. Now let's take this guy off so I don't have to pause the video a couple of times. I'm going to put my 36 millimeter socket. I don't have an impact one like this, but I'm going to use my breaker bar. So if I can, actually, you know what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to use my impact wrench, because I've got this guy off the ground, so I don't have any tension for him. Hold on a second. We'll come back in a minute. Okay, I'm going to put my 13 millimeter box end socket underneath this. He's part way. A little bit too torquey for my electric ratchet here. I have to use them in manual mode. All right. This guy off. Reach down here. I dropped the nut. Take it out of the bracket here, and I'm going to put it back in the A-arm. Put the nut back on the bottom part way so we don't lose them. All right, now let's come up to the front. See if we can get this off with an electric impact wrench. If not, I'll have to get out my air one. Not budging. Looks like it's going to be a job for the pneumatic wrench. These little, you know, these new electric ratchets, pneumatic, I shouldn't even say pneumatic, these new kind of wrenches just really amaze me. Back in my day, something like that, I guess it still is my day, what am I talking about? But back in the old days, nothing short of a pneumatic air gun would have got something like this off. Anyway, make sure you wear hearing protection when you do that kind of stuff. All right, so I got the one more that I mentioned that's inside the hood. Let me go take care of that. So let's pause for a second and switch over to the hood. We'll get the other fastener that's holding the ABS sensor wire on. Okay, guys, I'm not going to be able to film removing this, but I'm going to show you where it is. So, you know, as you come in here under the wheel well liner and you follow this ABS sensor up, you'll see this bracket. It's right here on top of the frame bracket that holds the bushings for the upper control arm. This 13 millimeter here, we're going to take this out. That'll be the last retaining bracket. Then we can come over and unplug this ABS sensor harness so we can remove the assembly from the axle. So I'm going to pause while I do that, and then we'll come back and take it off. Okay, guys, we took that guy off. You know, again, I'm trying not to damage my liner here. Actually replaced it a few years ago. But you reach your hand up under there, and you just lift your thumb up and get the tab off of this guy, and then pull him out of the frame, and he comes off. And that sensor assembly plug is right there. Okay, so we got this guy off. Nothing holding him on here. In fact, let me just undo our bungee for a minute. It's holding our caliper. Get that guy out of the way. Keep him still up there. All right, so now I said the hardest job was getting those spindle bolts out, and that is. The second hardest job is now getting the thing off. What I like to do is take this axle, this is, you know, for your CV joint where the shaft comes in, and just give it with a brass hammer now, just give it a couple of hits. You can see it's moving back. And then we can see if we get lucky. Yeah, we got lucky. Well, maybe not. Came off part way. Give it a few more whacks. All right, this guy's pretty heavy. Okay. Now what usually happens on these is they get all rusty inside here, and then they seize up and they grab. As long as that doesn't happen, and by the way, this shield just comes right off. As long as that doesn't happen, we can retain the bearing assembly and reuse it with the new rotor. Now, a lot of times what happens is in getting this stuff off, in the old days, the dealer used to damage, either they damage this cable, you go get a new rotor, you drive away, and then all of a sudden you're getting a speed sensor ABS warning on the dash, and then they come back and they try to sell you the whole thing over again, because GM would sell the rotor and the hub all as one unit to avoid that kind of problem. So you'd end up laying out a big chunk of change. All right, so when we get this done, I'm going to kind of get some of this rust out of here, and then I'm going to put some high temperature GM wheel bearing grease inside here just as an anti-corrosion inhibitor. But we got this guy off, so we're lucky so far. Now what we got to do now, I mentioned that the rotor and the hub is held together by the studs. So we're going to go over to a hydraulic press, and we're going to press these out. Now if you don't have a press, I showed in my other video from a few years ago when I was just replacing a hub, how you can come over, and let me see if I can get one over here just to show you briefly. Take one of the lug nuts that was laying here. If you don't have a press, you can put a lug nut on one of these. You want to go down pretty far, and naturally that for some reason this one's giving me a hard time to finger tighten. I don't know why. Something with that particular stud, I guess. Anyway, you go all the way down by hand with this until you get flush, so that you don't damage either the lug nut or the bolt, like that. And then you come in here again, always with a brass hammer, because brass will take the dents and it won't dent steel or iron. And then you can pound this kind of guy out. I mean, I doubt I can do it here. Give it a shot, but usually you got to get it on a piece of wood or something. Oh, there it goes. And then you can do it this way. In my opinion, it takes longer. And then you get this problem right here, right where you got to kind of pull it back up Got to loosen the lug nut a little bit. Hit it again, pull it up, loosen the lug nut. It's out now. Take the lug nut off. Take this guy out, we'll show you what I'm talking about. Hopefully you can see the detail here. But the shoulder of these studs is serrated. You see these teeth. And they mesh into serrations that are inside the flange of the wheel hub. This is all, if you're using genuine GM parts. If you're using aftermarket, it might be a little bit of a different design, but this is all genuine GM stuff. And that is what retains these, and that's what normally gets pressed in or hammered in with a brass punch, which is what I'm going to use to put them in. I'm not going to use a press to put them in, but I usually use a press to remove them because it goes faster. But anyway, that's how you can do it if you don't have a press with a lug nut. I'm going to go take this over to the press, take these other ones out, and we'll come back. Guys, we got these lug studs pushed out here. Now we're going to be switching over to the new rotor. So now what we got to do is, after we get that, we got to get the hub separated from the rotor because of corrosion. What happens is that it gets corroded in here, and it has difficulty separating. So what I do for that is I take these 2x4s, kind of set them up like this, so they're going to be sitting on the face of the rotor. So now what I've got is I've got the rotor sitting there, and I've got the hub just kind of sitting on its own. And I'm going to try a tap here on the hub to see if I can get the rust to let go. There we go. And then we just kind of turn it like that because of these cutouts. And then again, we want to be careful with our ABS cable. And now this guy, I'll be ready to take to the machine shop. We'll see if we can get it turned and be able to use it one more time. Okay, so now we're going to put a new rotor on here, a new ACDelco rotor for this 3/4 ton vehicle. It's a 191-74965 would be the GM number. And then the ACDelco number is an 18A, is an Apple 489. Now you can get these on eBay pretty cheap if you wait for them, which is what I did. Just take this guy, we'll put it here for a second. And they're sealed up in here with a rust protection chemical. I want to use that for the old one here, so I'm going to try and not destroy this bag. Okay. And now we're going to reverse what we just did. Let's set our 2x4s here. Take this guy. Now I'd like to take a look at him, make sure he's okay before I put all this back together. Any crud or debris that looks like it might be on here. And then, like I said, we're going to grease up this part of this bearing flange where it goes into the spindle. All right. So this is your outside. This is your inside. I'm going to run the wire through here. Get that out of the way. And then we're going to line up, again, these notches that we see in the top of the rotor are where our bolt flanges come through. At that point, we're just going to give it a turn so that the flanges are off center. And then we're going to change the orientation of our 2x4s so that we can put the studs back in. All right, so what you can see up here, if you come on top here, so here is where the flanges would line up with those cutouts in the rotor. Now I've turned it slightly, and now all of my heads, all of my holes line up for my studs. And you can just kind of feel with your finger that the serrated teeth are finding where they need to go. I usually do like maybe 3 of these at a time, and I don't do the side with the ABS in case I miss. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brass hammer and I'm going to take a brass punch. And I'm going to drive these through. Again, just making sure that the serrations feel like they're lined up first. Just want to bottom them out, just like that, so they're nice and flush. Going to do this one now. Now you could push these in with the press. A lot of people don't have a press, so I'm showing it this way. Now I'm going to turn my ABS sensor all the way over here, opposite side. I'm going to do this one. You can feel when it bottoms out. Again, make sure you have hearing protection on. And there, we've got 3 of them in. So I'm going to do the other 5, and then we'll come back and we'll get ready to put it on the truck. We've got all these guys in, you know, and we can double check our work because we can see the brass marks left on each of the studs. But all 8 of them are in now. I'm going to leave this cosmoline coating on the rotor for just a little bit longer. I'm going to take some emery cloth. I mentioned I was going to clean up this flange here that gets rusty. All I'm trying to do is just take some of the outside scale and rust off before I put this back together. And I told you I was going to put some wheel bearing grease, some high temperature wheel bearing grease on here. And again, all I'm doing this for is, you can look at one of the videos I had from a couple of years ago. I had one of these things get rusted solid inside on a pickup truck, and the whole thing, you know, blew apart on me. You know, grenaded on me, and the bearing went every which way. It was a weekend project to repair. So I started doing this. I didn't used to do all of my own maintenance. You know, I just never had time with work. I used to count on the dealers to do it, and as I got down to doing this stuff myself, I can see that I should have always done it myself, because they don't always treat your vehicle the way you would treat it yourself. Okay, the next thing is to come and do the same thing on this inside lip. And we're not looking to get bare metal. We're just looking to get the scale and the crusty pieces off, so we get a nice smooth fit when we put it back together. Believe me, this is not as bad as it can be. I mean, I haven't, neither of my trucks are too bad, but I did see co-workers one time that came from the Northeast. Man, that was really caked up rust. I eventually told him, just get a new spindle from the salvage yard instead of dealing with it. All right, that all nice and smoothed up. I'm going to take some compressed air. Again, you want to wear hearing and eye protection when you're doing some of these jobs that are showing here. Definitely eye protection in this case. Kind of get some of the debris that's up here on top of the spindle. This is all just paint that's crumbling off. Just going to get it out of the way. Dried up grease and what have you. Same thing with what we did here. Okay. Now what I'm going to be doing to prevent this corrosion problem, usually this is a really old product. I used this one time when I was doing some work on my 57 Chevrolet restoration. I used this product to pack the wheel bearings. 105-1344, just as good on a modern vehicle as it was on one from 1957. Of course, the product is not that old itself, but you get where I'm coming from. I'm just going to run it all the way around this flange that we sanded off. I'll put some on the mating surface as well. Again, I recommend this just to prevent the corrosion problem. just because I got burned so bad with that last one that I mentioned. And then same thing on the inside lip here. Just a smooth film. You don't need to cake it in there. Just until you can be sure your gloved finger, and by the way, yeah, definitely have gloves on. You don't want to just be smearing these kind of chemicals around on your bare skin. Okay, the same deal. I'm going to run it on the flange. Just very lightly. And again, corrosion protection. Although I live in the south and not in the northeast, I don't have to deal with this problem as bad, but it's still there. Okay, seal up this grease. Get a little bit of this off my hands. Now we're going to take some brake clean. I don't need to splash it around because I'm afraid I'll get it on the grease we just put on. I just gently press the nozzle. We're going to take this protective anti-rust compound that Delco put on here off. It's kind of like a Cosmoline type coating. Obviously not good to get that on the new brake pads. Just going to take it off this side for now. Make sure you do that though, because I would imagine any kind of new rotor, or maybe even from the machine shop, depending on what your machine shop does, they think you're going to be taking a few days or a week to pick it up. They may put some type of coating on to prevent corrosion as well. Anything on the surface is going to get wiped out the first time you stop the brakes, but you definitely don't want any pitting. Okay, now we're going to take our shield. We're going to put that back on. Goes like that. Going to get our bracket a little bit out of the way for us. All right, so now we're going to have to keep this guy centered while we put it up here and we get our top two spindle bolts ready to stick in here. So I'm going to get those guys in position. And what I like to do on the spindle bolts too, definitely don't put any anti-seize on them. I do like to put a little bit of penetrating oil on them. Just makes them go in easier. It'll burn off as things get heated up, so you don't have to worry about it loosening the torque. Definitely do not put anti-seize on these guys. Now, the other thing is I'm looking at here, I'm seeing that the shield actually has a little bit of rust through down here. So next time I'm at the salvage yard, I'll pick up one of these shields as well, throw it in the garage next time I do this job, swap it out. That's what you can do, is when you're in here is the best time to check for things that you need. Obviously I'm not going to do it on this video, but I can certainly see there's cause for a second video. I saw in the back here, the lower ball joint, the rubber is split and letting grease leak out. So it's probably time to do the ball joints. These are the original ball joints from 1999 on the top and the bottom. Original A-arm bushings. So that's probably going to be another project I do later this year, maybe in the summer. All right. So now, actually, take back what I said. I'm going to put just a little bit of this grease on the teeth of the axle here, just to make reassembly go a little easier as well. And then all along the back side, just a little bit. I'm going to try not to get any on the teeth of where the, on the threads of where the axle nut goes. All right. Now this is the part that's a little hard, keeping this shield lined up while lifting it on here by yourself and running the spindle bolt through, and without this axle moving on you. Sometimes it's easier to have a helper. I'm going to try to just work him back on. Enough to get the nut, the bolt, where I can thread the bolt, then the bolts will do the rest of the work for you. Yes, it is as hard as it looks. All right. Not quite enough to get my bolts to thread, but at least I can get them in here. Might have to do is I might have to get a hammer. Yeah, let me pause the video here and see what I need to do. Guys, actually I figured out how to do it myself. You know, the problem was that the axle kept sliding out of the spindle. So what I ended up doing is I ended up wedging a couple of pieces of wood in here so I could keep it straight, so I could get it on finally enough and I could finish it. As soon as I can get it to where I can thread the axle nut on, I can use this to push it the rest of the way on. Right, so get enough room to put the washer in there now. Maybe. No, not yet. Now we got enough room to get the washer on there. At this point I want to stop and see if I can get the spindle bolts to line up. I can take my little contraption out now, I think, hopefully. Again, we've got our shield resting on the bolts against the spindle, so that part's lined up. Just need to get the bearing assembly turned enough to thread them in. There we go. I definitely recommend doing this by hand to start. As soon as you got a couple of sides on, you can just keep, well, get it the right direction. You can just keep using the axle nut. So I'm just tightening these in by hand. And then I'll get a ratchet in here and finish them up. So yeah, I forgot about the last time I did this a few years ago. I had somebody helping me hold this shaft in the back so that it didn't move. And by the way, you know, speaking like I said, whenever you do something like this, you'll find other jobs you need to do. When I was looking to see what I could do here, I noticed my boot has come split here. So that'll be another job I end up having to do here. Get a new boot on here. End up taking this all off again, you know. Fun stuff, fun stuff. Okay. If I can find my ratchet wrench. There he is. Get these tightened in with the ratchet wrench snug, and then I'll come back with the torque wrench. I'll tell you guys what the torque is on all this stuff. So we'll torque down these 4 spindle bolts, and then we'll torque down the axle nut itself. So let me go ahead and ratchet these 4 in, and then we'll come back, torque them, and then we'll move on to replacing the brake hose and caliper. I'm going to torque these up now. They're 133 foot-pounds. So I'm just going to use my same impact socket with my torque wrench and get them to 133. Got that one. Didn't quite hear the top one. There we go. All right, we're going to torque the other side the same way. Don't need to necessarily film that. I'll get that later. The next thing we're going to do, if we were just changing the rotor, we'd be about done. In fact, one step I will do right here is we need to clean the front face off the Cosmoline. We were talking about earlier. We only did the back side. So I will clean the front side. And then just in case, I'm going to go around the back side one more time so we got a nice clean surface. Roll this on here, and then in between the side that the shield doesn't cover, you can just wrap this guy around a few times, make sure he's nice and clean. There's a little piece there, that little stain from the Cosmoline that I guess is just a manufacturing thing. Interesting. All right. At that point, we would just put the rotor, we just put the caliper back on, torque up these ABS retaining harness bracket bolts. You know, we had one here on the A-arm, and then we had one on the inside. I already slipped it back into the clips, and I already plugged it back in over there. And then we put this guy on here, and then put the bolt on, and we tighten it up. However, I said we're going to change out the hose and the caliper as well, so we're not quite done. But just to show you, at that point, we would have just come down, and we would have just done. We're going to have to open this up because it's a bigger caliper now, and we would have just put this guy back on. So now what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to continue on, and I'm going to remove this, and I'm just going to take the whole thing off right up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove some of these retaining clips because I don't want to mess up and damage the liner. Just keeps the corrosion out of the way. So use a tool like this, and it pops these guys out. And if they break off, it's easier to replace these little push pin clips than it is the liner itself. All right, here I left my wrench in to show you, tightening up this other bracket for the ABS harness that we were talking about earlier. All right, so to get the hose off, there's this little clip here. Get a flathead screwdriver. This little clip here has to come off. Just trying to get him up a little bit to not have him be at an angle. I'll see if I can get him off just the way he is. Guy hasn't been off in a long time, but we got him off. That clip out of the way. Once we separate the hard line from the soft line here, we'll be able to pull the soft line out of this bracket. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my flare wrench, which I'm realizing now I don't have out here, and we'll take the brake line off, and we'll take this whole thing, hose, caliper, recycle bin, and we'll bring over the new stuff, and we'll install it. At that point, we'll be done. So we'll come back in a minute. All right, guys. I went ahead and started this because I knew this was going to be a problem. Got a little pan down here to catch the brake fluid. I knew this is the original line from 1999 on this Suburban, so I knew it was going to be a real pita to get off here because as I could tell, this line was pretty well rusted on up here. What I ended up doing, because I didn't want to end up getting the map torch out here and heating it up, I got this little tool here that I use for some kind of situations like this. It's called a clench wrench. Don't use it a lot, but it's basically a kind of wrench that grabs, and the tighter you get, the harder it grabs, and it can help you with avoiding a situation where you might strip a rusty flare fitting or flare nut like this out. I used a 5/8 on the hose side because there's some flats right up here after you take that clip out that holds it to this bracket. And then a wrench like this, you can get in here and it'll just grab the thing really hard. And that's basically the only way to get something off rusted like this, unless you get out and get off a MAP or propane torch and heat it up, which I really didn't want to do. And get it off enough to maybe get the regular box end wrench or flare wrench on it. I'd let it soak for with some PB Blaster for about 25-30 minutes as well. The brake fluid's finally working its way out. Once it gets going, you can get it off with a 9/16, and then I've got a little cap that I'm going to put on the end of it when I get it all the way off. Yeah, there we go. Just avoided tearing this thing up on the top. Too bad, anyway. All right. Hopefully this is the right size. Probably not. I'm gonna have to go get something else in here. All right, well, I got this hose down here. I'm gonna go get another fitting to put on this end so I don't lose too much brake fluid. And then we're gonna take this whole thing out, like I mentioned, and replace it with new. So let me come back and just found a better size little plastic plug to help me with this problem here. So I'm going to take my bungee cord off the caliper assembly. And actually, now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to need to retain this banjo bolt that's on the back. It's a 10mm. It's going to be easiest if I just get this guy back on to the new rotor. Give me some leverage to push it out. Somewhere over here I got my tool to compress these guys. Again, you know, you might be able to pick up on some of this if we were changing out the pads alone. You get yourself a screwdriver and you can pop these Delco pads off the caliper indentation. Slip in one of these guys to compress the caliper piston, and then you can see the brake fluid's going to squirt out the hose as we do that. The main reason I'm just doing this is this boot on the other side is cracked. You can't see it on this side. On the other side, and it's let water get in here, and now the piston's all rusty and corroded. Could rebuild it. Cheaper just to replace it. Less time and effort. All right, take that out. Pop this guy back in. I think it'll be good enough to get it to slip over the rotor. There we go. Now I have enough leverage to go back in the back here and get that banjo nut off. Presuming I brought the right wrench, which I didn't. Let me pause for a second and go get my 10mm. So I put the caliper back on just temporarily, and I tightened up the lower pin so that I can get over here with an 11mm socket and get this banjo bolt off. Use that torque wrench because it was the first thing I could grab. Now that I got it loose, I'm going to go back down and get my Allen wrench. Get these bolts back off. Never ceases to amaze me how stuff kind of walks on you. You have it right down next to you, and then you go look again, it seems like it has gone somewhere else. Anyway, lefty-loosey. So, like I said, we just put this on here so we get some leverage to get that off. And I also don't want to have the brake fluid go all over the place here. So now that I got it loose, we can finish it the rest of the way off the vehicle here. So I'm just going to remove this guy again. And I'm going to take him off, and I'm going to sit him down in the pan. And then I'm going to remove the banjo bolt. That's the only thing I'm going to salvage from this. The rest of it is going to go to recycling, scrap metal. And I think I might have turned this one a little bit as well. Okay. Okay, now we're going to remove that banjo bolt. Some of these other tools out of the way. Should be able to get him off with just a finger at this point in the socket. Okay. There he is. That'll all drain off. And all I want is this bolt. I'm going to put new copper washers on, so we don't care about that. There's another one stuck on the other side here. Don't care about that. Right, put this hose in here. Overall, not as bad as it could have been, being that this has been on here almost exactly 20 years. And it's still working good. You probably could have kept going with it, but when the piston starts getting corroded like that and visible pitting and the boot's cracked, it's not going to be long before it seizes up. So I had to change the rotor anyway. Why not go all the way and get all the rest of it out? All right, got a few bits of grime on our rotor again. We're going to have to clean it. Let's look at the new stuff that we're putting on. So for the new stuff, we've got a brand new brake line. For the left-hand side, this is the driver's side we're working on. It's a GM 221-63451. Okay, so we've got a brand new brake line. We've got a brand new caliper. Left-hand side, it's a GM 180-14747, and it's a Delco 172-1433, made in the USA. That's what I like to see. I've got some new copper washers, GM 210-12386. We're going to be using one of these on each side of the banjo bolt. And the caliper is not going to come with new shoes, new pads, so we got new pads for both sides. 191-52634 is the GM number, Delco 171-598 for this particular vehicle. Again, made in the USA. Be American, buy American. All right, let's take this apart. What you get in the package here, this is kind of an older box. I looked for these on eBay. I think I maybe paid 20 bucks for this. And then you got shipping. You can tell it's an older design because the newer ones, they don't paint them anymore. They just come as bare steel. And so what they do is they take the cap for the bleeder and they use that to plug up the hole for the banjo bolt. So we take that out first. We've got all new hardware in here, but I don't know how long this is sitting. I consider this like NOS. So I'm going to take these pins out and I'm going to put new silicone grease in there, but I won't change out the hardware. But this guy's all nice and shiny and brand new, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, so let's take our new hose. Let's get the rest of this kind of like vacuum sealed GM packaging off of it. Okay, and we're going to do a deal like this. So this is going to sit on just like the other one did, and then it's going to sit just like this. So there's a little boss that's been machined here on the side, and there's a little ridge, and the whole thing will sit like this. Okay, so a couple of copper washers. These copper washers have been around 50, 60 years. See them on cars from the 50s when you're doing the brakes. Take our banjo bolt, which is the only thing we're going to be reusing. Again, we're looking for on here nice head flanges, no stripping, bolt's not corroded. It's got a little bit of just dried up old brake fluid on it, I guess. Get some of that off. We're making sure is that we don't have any obstructions in the hole here. So there's a hole here. You can take a dental pick, make sure there's no debris in there. And then the whole thing here is hollow. This is a hollow bolt. So the brake fluid goes through here and through there. So all this looks good. Put one of these guys on. Put him through here. And I'm going to put another one on the other side. And then I'm going to run him in here. And if I've got I'm not going to torque him in my lap here. I'm just going to get him on part way. That should be tight enough to prevent any leaks from happening. And at this point, you come back and get the shoes, or excuse me, the pads on, and re-lube these guys. So let's do that. Open up this GM package, Delco package, whatever. And then normally, if we were going to change these out on that old caliper, we'd have all new inside dust covers and washers for both sides, as well as end caps, and a little container of silicone paste. Okay, so we're going to tap on a shoe on the, apologize for the aircraft going overhead. Now this guy sits on like this. If you look in the top back bag here, or the box here, you've got two shoes with wear indicators on them. I like to put them on where the wear indicator is on the trailing side, so facing the bottom, like that. Screwdriver, handy dandy screwdriver tool. These guys to pop in, they go into these two indentations. Okay, so last thing we're going to do is we're going to push these pins out. And so like I said, they've been sitting for a while, shelf wear, so you can see a little bit of marks from the washers in these. Orange silicone rubber. Left a little mark on them. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change those washers out, given what I just saw. Same thing on here, just not as bad. All right, so what we'll do to do that is go grab my dental pick again, and I will use the dental pick to fish these guys out. There's one. Again, I probably could have left him in there, but I just didn't like the fact that it had lifted off some material onto the pins. That just doesn't look good to me. So we'll toss these. We got new ones with the pads anyway. Might as well use them. Okay, there's two on each side. Get this one out from the back end here. Same deal. So you guys get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and finish removing these, and then I'm going to get some silicone paste in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside here. I'm going to leave these dust covers on the ends. There's nothing wrong with those, and these end caps. And all I'm going to take from the kit is I'm going to install these rubber washers in the back side and the front side. All you end up doing, slide them in like this. And you can use your pinky finger to push them on one end and your other finger to push them on this end until you feel them slide into the groove. And then you're done. Okay. I'll do this side now. Take the two on the top out and do the same thing, and then we'll come back. Hey guys, I got those 4 in there. I went ahead and took these dust covers off so I could get my finger in enough to make sure that both of them, front and back, are sitting in their little recessed areas. I'm going to put some more silicone paste in here. You definitely do not ever want to use grease on this kind of thing. It has to be silicone or some other type of material that's specified for brakes. Towards the end of my can here, but I use this 3M silicone paste is what I typically use. You can pick it up at AutoZone. You can never have too much of this stuff in here. All right. I'm going to take what I got on here off, because what I'm going to do now, I decided, you know, I'm not going to try to emery cloth these pins just because they have that little bit of that silicone from those other washers sticking to them. I am going to do a mix of something else though. Well, I'm going to clean it again because I dropped it on the ground. I like to use this Permatex Ultra caliper lube as well. What I use this for is I try to get this down into a little slide itself. So this outer piece slides on this inner bolt, and this needs to move as well as the outer piece. So just a preference over the years. Definitely don't want any sand on here, so I smeared all that off. Put this guy back in. Just right about to there. We don't want to see the pin through the dust shield. We just want to see the threads. Okay, and then we got the other one. Same deal. It's almost as much work putting a new caliper in as changing out the pads on the old caliper, if you're going to do it right. If you're absolutely positive that it's a brand new manufactured caliper, not something that's been sitting on the shelf for a few years, then you probably skip some of the steps I'm doing here, but I don't want to be doing this job again for a while. Next time I take this off, it'll be to change out those upper and lower ball joints and that CV boot that we saw that was damaged when we had all this stuff apart. Okay. One last thing and then we'll mount it all up. We're going to need to put those dust covers back on. And what I do to get these to fully seat, I managed to go right in the box. I like to take like a, in this case, a 21mm socket. And then I can use that to seat this thing. Just using like a plastic hammer. You can use a rubber mallet. Does the same thing. Same thing on this side. I'm mostly using a plastic hammer or a rubber mallet because I don't want to damage my socket. Okay. Make sure nothing got in there. All right. Ready to mount it up. Make sure we don't have anything on our gloves just in case we accidentally touch something. Now, one of the things I ended up doing before, I had this, ended up having this all backwards. So I redid that. It's 11mm banjo bolt. So it should look like this going in the up direction. I had it going backwards the other time because you're going to end up having to have this bracket with this tongue to where it can fit in here. Right? So let's get this guy up in here. Nice and flush. Not flush yet. It's hanging up on the bottom. All right, almost at it. So if we can get one side started, I think the bottom I can get started. Not. When everything's brand new, this has to go back in just a certain way. Let's just try to get the top started. We'll get one side started. You won't be able to pivot and get the other side in later. Still something binding. I haven't seen it yet. Feel it though. Let's push this bottom bolt back. For that's what it was. All right. It's still sticking out, even though I didn't think it was. Okay. So we can definitely get this guy going. Now, if you got a 9mm Allen on a ratchet end, this will go a lot faster. I know I got one somewhere, but don't feel like looking for it. Don't use it that often. I don't mind doing it like this because I'm normally not filming anything. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause for a moment to tighten everything up. And then we'll come back and we'll finish up with this brake hose because I didn't tighten up that banjo bolt because I want to make sure that I do have it exactly where it needs to be, and might still not have it right where it belongs yet. So we'll come back in just a second. So yeah, it was on the right way after all. I just wanted to make double sure. I'm going to turn this guy over this way a little bit. So I didn't tighten this down yet. I'm going to torque it in a minute. I just want to get it in a position. So I am going to torque the banjo bolt now. It goes to 33 foot-pounds. So I don't have a small torque wrench that can do that. So I'm going to have to get this big contraption in here. As we torque it, we'll seat those copper washers, provide a seal because they're soft. Wish I had a smaller torque wrench to get more leverage. Okay, now we just hooked it back up to the hard line and we're done. Put our clip back in. Right, so we'll take our liner out of the way again, and like I said, I'll tighten these others up and torque them last. So I've got this guy sitting in the bracket. I'm going to take my little cover off that I used to prevent the brake fluid from running out. hand thread him back into the new line, new hose rather. And basically, because he was, you know, in a rusty state, I'm going to go do this a couple of times just to be sure that I get a good connection made up. All right, now I'm going to get my box end wrench here, 9/16. I'm going to start threading him the rest of the way in. She's going pretty good. I'm just going to make him snug. I'm not going to over tighten him, given that it had the rust problem before. Now I'm going to put the clip back on, the retaining clip. Flat side, so these little curves face out. Okay, and now the only thing left to do is torque these guys down. And before I do that, though, I'm going to get the liner back into position, and then we'll bleed the caliper, and we're all done. So let me go do that. I wanted to show kind of a closer look at why I was replacing this caliper. You can see the boot here has cracked up on this one. It's also the same on the other side, which lets water get up underneath on the piston and start to corrode it from the back side and the inside. In the old days, you'd rebuild this and put a new boot kit on it, but it's cheaper just to put a new caliper on altogether, as well as the other one that has the rusty piston. And then the other thing I mentioned earlier in the video were, you can replace your spindle bolts. And here's a pack of NOS ones here, part number 888-91741. And this is what I'll put on the other side for those ones that have their heads kind of filed down from previous people that didn't have the kind of equipment that we were talking about with the 6-sided socket. So let's continue on with what we were showing earlier. All done here. I like to use my little Mighty Vac to do the bleeding, and 10mm wrench to open and close the bleeder. When I get all done, I like to put water and hose down where any brake fluid might have got spilt, because it eats into everything. So I've washed everything off here, and I've double checked before I wash that we're good in the front facing and the back facing. No binding going on here. Make sure that my ABS sensor cable is not kinked or caught onto anything. You saw us put the clip and tighten up. I never could find torque values for these two 13s and the 13 inside. So I just snugged them down. Maybe I'll find that later in the service manual. If I do, I'll update the video, but I didn't see anything for these particular fasteners, so I just snugged them down. And again, we torqued down this guy. We torqued down our 4 spindle bolts. After we get the tire on and we lower it, we're going to tighten up and torque this axle nut to 165 foot-pounds. That'll be the last thing we do. I won't show that because it's kind of self-explanatory. We're going to put the tire on, we'll drop it, and we'll torque this guy up before we put the wheel cover on over the lug nuts. So hope this video helps you out. But we've got a new rotor, we've got a new caliper, we've got new pads, and we've got a new hose. This is a complete front brake overhaul. Going to repeat the same routine on the passenger side now, and hope this video helps you out. Thanks for watching.